Today, we're diving into a part of the Civil War you probably never heard about in school. This is the story of a secret war, one fought not on the battlefield, but from the shadows of a neutral country. It's a tale of spies, saboteurs, and a whole lot of secret cash.
When you think of the Civil War, you probably picture massive armies clashing at places like Gettysburg or Antietam, right? But what if I told you there was another, much darker conflict brewing just over the northern border, one that was all about spreading panic and terror throughout the Union?
All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll set the stage for this war in shadows. Then we'll meet the Canadian command, the guys in charge. After that, it's all about their wild schemes in plots, panic, and sabotage. Then we'll see why it all started crumbling from within. And finally, we'll get to the most infamous part, the Booth connection.
Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1864. And to put it mildly, things are looking really bad for the South. On the conventional battlefield, they're losing. So, with their backs against the wall, they decided it was time for a desperate gamble, a completely new kind of strategy.
And what was this big idea? To open a brand new front. From Canada. Yeah, you heard me right, Canada. So you're probably asking, why there? Well, Canada was officially neutral, but it was also crawling with Southern sympathizers. It was a safe haven for escaped Confederate prisoners of war. And, this is key, it was a secure way to communicate with allies back in England. It was pretty much the perfect launchpad for a secret war.
Now, you might be thinking this was just some rogue operation, a few guys acting on their own. Nope, not even close. This came from the very top. We're talking about Confederate President Jefferson Davis himself. In early 1864, he gave the official green light for a new spy mission, and boy did they put some serious money behind it.
How much money? Well, the Confederate Congress created a Secret Service fund of $5 million. I know that might not sound like a crazy number today, but in the 1860s, that was an absolutely astronomical amount of money. It just goes to show you how all in they were on this new secret war.
And get this. Out of that $5 million, a full $1 million, in gold no less, was set aside just for this Canadian mission. That's 20% of their entire Secret Service budget. And this massive war chest was handed directly to the man in charge, a guy named Jacob Thompson.
So, Thompson gets his $1 million and his orders, straight from President Davis. And the mission was pretty straightforward. Set up shop in Montreal and, well, wreak havoc. Attack Union targets, stir up rebellions in states like Ohio and Illinois. Just cause as much chaos and disruption as you possibly can.
So, you've got $1 million in gold and a clear mission to cause chaos. What do? Well, the spy ring got right to work. Their entire goal was to bring the war home to the North, to spread panic and drain Union resources through a series of incredibly audacious plots. And when I say audacious, I mean it. Their plans were just wild. They plotted to arm Northern sympathizers to start a whole new rebellion. They tried to capture a U.S. warship on Lake Erie to free thousands of prisoners. They literally attempted to burn down large parts of New York City, setting fire to 19 hotels and even P.T. Barnum's museum using a chemical weapon called Greek fire. And, okay, this one is just bizarre. They even hatched a plot to assassinate Lincoln by mailing him clothes infected with yellow fever. You can't make this stuff up. So, as you might guess, nearly all of these grand schemes failed, and failed spectacularly. But one of them didn't. One operation actually worked, and it brought the shock and terror of the Civil War crashing down on a sleepy little northern town that never, ever saw it coming. It all went down on October 19, 1864, in St. Albans, Vermont. 21 Confederate raiders had been hanging around town for days, pretending to be sportsmen on a hunting trip. Then, all at once, they dropped the act. They hit 3 different banks at the same time, all at gunpoint. They tried to burn the town down, but that part mostly failed. And all the chaos, though, a local resident was shot and killed. And then, just as quickly as they'd appeared, they fled back across the border to Canada.
So, how much did they make off with? $200,000. A massive haul that went right back into funding more Confederate plots. But honestly, the money wasn't even the most important part. The raid created absolute panic across the North. It proved that no town was truly safe. The war could reach anyone, anywhere.
So this all raises a huge question, right? They had $1 million budget, and they just pulled off a successful raid. So why did the whole Canadian spy ring just completely fall apart? Well, the answer isn't what you'd think. It wasn't Union spies that took them down.
The fatal flaw was right at the very top.
The mission was led by two men who absolutely could not stand each other. You had the boss, Jacob Thompson, who was described as a man of sterling integrity, but he was also way too trusting. Probably not the best quality for a spy master. And his number two, Clement Clay, was the complete opposite. He was not practical and was described as peevish, irritable, and suspicious. It was a personality clash of epic proportions, and it was poison from day one.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Their own military advisor, Captain Thomas Hines, said it himself. He wrote that the leaders were not harmonious from the inception of their mission and that it was one of the most potent obstacles for success. It got so bad they actually just separated. Thompson stayed in Montreal and Clay packed up and moved to St. Catharines. You just can't run a spy ring when the leaders aren't even in the same city.
So really, the mission was doomed for three main reasons. First, the leadership was a total mess. Second, because Thompson was so trusting, Union spies were all over them. Seriously, federal detectives would just hang out at his hotel bar and listen in on everything. And third, the killer of any spy operation, it was absolutely riddled with double agents. And maybe the most damaging traitor of all was a guy named Godfrey Hyams. Thompson had given him some money, basically out of pity. How did Hyams repay him? By going straight to the Union authorities and telling them everything. His testimony exposed a secret factory making torpedoes, disguised as lumps of coal, designed to be shoveled right into the furnaces of Union steamships. So the spy ring pretty much collapsed under the weight of its own incompetence. But the story doesn't end there. In its final months, it gets tangled up with one of the most infamous figures in all of American history, John Wilkes Booth. And when you look at the timeline, it is incredibly suspicious. On October 18, 1864, that's the day before the St. Albans raid, Booth shows up in Montreal. He checks into the very same hotel the Confederate agents were using as a base. He has meetings with them, a deposit of 455 Canadian dollars is made for him in a bank. And then he heads back to Washington and starts to put his assassination plot into motion.
Look, the evidence is circumstantial, but it is really compelling. We have the meetings with Confederate agents. We have the money deposited for him, an amount that was later found recorded in his accomplice's bank book. And maybe most damning of all, when Booth was finally cornered and killed, they found a Canadian bill of exchange on his body.
Now, has any historian ever found a piece of paper that says, "Go kill Abraham Lincoln"? No, there's no smoking gun like that. But the financial links, the personal links, they are just undeniable. The spy ring was desperate. Their big plans had all failed. They certainly had the motive. And Booth had the means and opportunity, which seemed to have been provided, at least in part, by his contacts in Canada.
And that leaves us with a final, chilling question. As the Confederacy's official secret war crumbled into failure and farce, did its agents, in one last desperate act, decide to bankroll an actor to commit the one act of terror that would echo through history forever? That's something to think about.